There's a fish swimming in the rivers of the American South right now that was old before the first dinosaur ever drew a breath. It wears armor a bullet has a hard time getting through. It can breathe air, gulp it right off the surface the way you or I would, and go on living in a hot, stagnant backwater that would kill nearly anything else with fins. It grows longer than a grown man stands tall and heavier than the refrigerator in your kitchen. And for the better part of 100 years, we did just about everything we could dream up to wipe it off the face of the earth. We shot it. We blew it up with dynamite. We called it a trash fish, a river monster, a killer. And we were wrong on every single count. This is the alligator gar, the largest thing swimming in fresh water almost anywhere in this country, and quietly, one of the most misunderstood animals in America. Stay with me for the next little while, and I'll show you where it came from, why it looks like it fell out of another age, and the real reason it's still here, when so much of the old world isn't. By the time we're done, you're going to watch that long, armored shape slide under your boat and see something completely different than you saw before. Do me a favor and hit subscribe first. This channel is where the old watercraft meets the science behind it, the stuff most anglers never get taught. And I put these out slow and steady all season long. Here's the road we're going to walk in this one. Where this fish came from, and why the old-timers had good reason to call it a living fossil. The armor and the strange lung that carried it through when the world changed around it. How big it truly gets. And the truth behind that record everybody argues about at the boat ramp. The sorry story of how we nearly lost it, and how it clawed its way back. How a man actually hooks one, fights it, and turns it loose without hurting it or himself. And a warning near the end that could save somebody in your family. A very bad night. So don't wander off before that part. Let's start with age, because age is the whole heart of this fish. When an old riverman looks at an alligator gar and calls it a dinosaur, he's closer to right than he knows. The gar's family has been swimming in more or less this same shape for over 150 million years. Put a number that big in your head for a second. There were still dinosaurs walking the banks when a gar that would look familiar to you today was already finning through the shallows. The asteroid came. The dinosaurs went. The ice ages came and went. The rivers rose and dried and moved. Whole worlds of animals appeared and vanished. And the gar just kept on being a gar. Biologists have a phrase for a creature like this. They call it a living fossil, an animal that found a design that worked so well it barely had to change. Look at one in the water, and you are, in a real way, looking straight back into the age of the reptiles. Now, a design doesn't survive that long by accident. It survives because it solves the hard problems. And the gar solved two of them in ways almost nothing else alive can match. The first is the armor. The second is the way it breathes. Let's take the armor first, because it's the thing you'll notice the moment you get your hands on one. Most fish you catch are covered in soft, thin scales that overlap like shingles on a roof, flexible and slick. Run your hand down a bass and it gives. The gar is nothing like that. A gar is wrapped head to tail in what scientists call ganoid-scales, and they are a different animal entirely. Each one is a hard, diamond-shaped plate, and instead of overlapping loosely, they lock together edge to edge like the links of chainmail, a solid, jointed suit of armor with no soft gaps. Those plates are built out of a bony base topped with a layer called ganoid, and ganoid is close kin to the enamel on your own teeth. You are essentially looking at a fish sheathed in tooth material. It is so tough that predators mostly give up. A big alligator gar can share the same stretch of river with a full-grown American alligator and swim right past it because the gator can't get through the hide. Only the smallest young gar have much to fear. People have known how tough that armor is for a very long time. Native peoples across the southeast used to harvest gar scales and work them into arrowheads and points, into ceremonial breastplates, and into jewelry. When the first European settlers came through, they tanned the tough, scaled skin and stretched it over wooden plow blades to keep the edge from wearing. And they cut it into leather for tools and purses. Now, there's an old river tale that a big gar's hide will turn a small caliber bullet, and plenty of old-timers on the Gulf rivers swore it was true. I'd take that one with a grain of salt, since the same men also shot plenty of gar dead over the years. But the fact that the story got told at all tells you something real about just how much like armor that hide feels in the hand. The second trick is the one that truly sets this fish apart, and it's the reason it lives where nothing else will. The alligator gar can breathe air. Not the way a fish breathes water through its gills. I mean, it rises to the surface, breaks the film, and gulps down a mouthful of actual air. And it uses that air to stay alive. Here's how it works. Along with regular gills, the gar carries a swim bladder that's been rebuilt by evolution into something close to a primitive lung. It's laced with blood vessels, and it connects up to the throat, so when the fish gulps air, oxygen passes straight out of that bladder and into the blood. On a hot, still summer day, you can watch them do it, rolling up to the top, one after another. A slow, porpoise-like roll and a soft gulp, then back down. Old-timers see that roll and know exactly what's swimming below. Think about what that buys a fish. In the dead of a southern summer, a shallow oxbow or a backwater slough can go so warm and so starved of oxygen that a bass or a crappie would belly up and die. The gar doesn't care. It just tips up, takes a breath of air, and goes right on hunting in water that has become a graveyard for everything else. That single ability, the lung nobody else in the neighborhood has, is a big part of why this ancient shape is still here, while flashier fish came and went. It found the low-oxygen backwater nobody else could use, and it made that hard country its home. So now you've got the picture. An armored, air-breathing survivor from the age of the dinosaurs. Let's talk about the part that gave it the fearsome name, the head and the teeth. Because this is where the myth and the truth split hard apart. The alligator gar gets its name honestly. That broad, flat snout really does look like a gator's, short and wide, nothing like the long, thin beak of the other gars. And inside it, the fish carries a mouthful of hardware that has scared people for generations. Up top, the alligator gar has a double row of teeth on each side of the upper jaw, where its cousins only have one. They're not huge, but they're needle-sharp, and they angle back, built to grab a slick fish and never let it slide free. This is an ambush hunter. It hangs nearly motionless in the water, looking for all the world like a floating log. And when a shad or a mullet or a small catfish swims too close, it turns its head and takes it in a short, savage lunge. Mostly it eats fish. Now and then, being an opportunist, it'll take a duck off the surface or grab a small turtle. It is a serious predator, and it deserves respect. But here's the truth that 100 years of scary stories buried, and I want to be plain about it because it matters. There is no credible record, anywhere, of an alligator gar killing a person. None. For all the teeth, for all the size, for all the monster of the deep talk, This fish is not a man-eater and never was. In the water, a gar is no threat to a swimmer. It wants nothing to do with you. The only way it hurts you is the same way any big, toothy fish can, when you've got it in the boat, thrashing, and you handle it carelessly. Those teeth will lay your hand open in a heartbeat. So the danger is real. But it's a handling danger, the kind you manage with respect and good sense, not the kind that drags children off docks. Hold on to that, because it's the exact misunderstanding that nearly cost us this whole species. Now, let's talk size, because this is where the arguments start. Just how big does an alligator gar get? Big enough that it stands as the largest fish in North American freshwater, save one, the white sturgeon? A common adult in good water runs 6, 7, even 8 feet long and well over 100 pounds. That's an ordinary big one. The giants go further. The largest alligator gar ever recorded weighed 327 pounds and stretched better than 8 feet. That fish turned up in Mississippi back in 2011, tangled in a commercial fisherman's net, rather than caught on rod and reel. And the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks weighed it, measured it, and put it on the record. You can go see that very fish today, on display at the state's Natural Science Museum in Jackson. Biologists who looked it over figured it had lived somewhere between 50 and 70-some years. For a fish landed the way you and I would fish, on a rod, the records run a hair smaller, up around 280 pounds. And in recent years, a handful of dedicated gar anglers have been rewriting the line class books one giant at a time. One Kentucky angler fought a fish over 7 feet long for nearly 4 hours, chasing it more than 2 miles across a Texas lake before he ever got a hand on it. That's the kind of animal we're talking about. And here's a detail that changes how you ought to think about the big ones. A fish that size is old. Alligator gar grow fast when they're young, then slow way down, and the true giants can push past 70, 80, even 90 years on this earth, with a real chance some touch 100. The females grow the largest. So when you see a photograph of a 300-pound gar, look past the size for a second. You're looking at an animal that was very likely swimming that river before you were born. And that's a thing worth remembering when we get to the sad part of this story. Because we treated these century-old giants like vermin. Before we get there, where do you find them? The alligator gar is a fish of the South and the lower Midwest. The stronghold is the Mississippi River Basin and the rivers and bayous draining to the Gulf of Mexico, with Texas holding some of the healthiest populations anywhere and the biggest individual fish. They favor the slow water, big sluggish rivers, oxbow lakes cut off from the main channel, floodplain sloughs, backwaters where the current barely moves. Because they can breathe air, they push into warm, low-oxygen water other fish avoid. And they'll even run down into the brackish estuaries where the river meets the salt, which almost no pure freshwater fish will tolerate. Historically, their range reached a good deal farther north, up the Mississippi past the mouth of the Illinois River, into states where today they're gone or barely hanging on. Now, here's a piece of gar wisdom that most people never learn, and it's the key to the whole species. The alligator gar doesn't spawn by the calendar. It spawns by the water. These fish need a spring flood. When heavy rains push the river up over its banks and out into the flooded grass and brush of the floodplain, that's the gar's signal. They move up into that warm, shallow, weedy water and lay their eggs on the fresh flooded vegetation, and the young have a rich, protected nursery to grow up in. No flood, no spawn. It's that simple, and it's that fragile. A gar can go years without a successful spawn, just waiting for the water to do the right thing. Learn to read the water, and you understand this fish. Wall the river off from its floodplain, and you cut the gar off from the one thing it can't do without. Hold that thought too, because we're about to see exactly what happens when you do. So let's tell the hard part. For most of the 20th century, this magnificent survivor was treated as a plague to be exterminated. Fishermen and even state agencies decided the alligator gar was a trash fish, and worse, a killer that was eating up all the bass and the crappie and ruining the good fishing. It wasn't true, but nobody knew that yet, and the belief did terrible things. Anglers killed every gar they could reach on sight. States ran organized eradication programs out to remove them wholesale. People shot them off the surface with rifles. In some places, they threw dynamite into the spawning congregations and blew them up by the dozen. One biologist who has spent his life with these fish put it plainly. Some horrible things, he said, were done to this animal. And while all that killing went on above the water, something quieter and even deadlier was happening to the rivers themselves. We dammed them. We straightened them, levied them, cut them off from their floodplains to control the water and grow crops and build towns. And remember what the gar needs to make more gar. It needs that river to jump its banks in spring and flood the grass. Take that away, and the fish simply stops reproducing. No dynamite required. Between the guns and the dams, the alligator gar disappeared from a big chunk of its old range. It was declared gone from several northern states. A fish that had outlasted the dinosaurs and the ice ages nearly got finished off in about 50 years by a misunderstanding. Then the science caught up, and the story turned. Fisheries biologists started actually studying what the alligator gar does in a river, and they found the exact opposite of the old fear. This fish isn't the enemy of a healthy fishery. It's one of the things that keeps a fishery healthy. As the top predator in its water, the gar holds down the populations of rough and invasive fish, the gizzard shad, the carp, the species that explode out of control and choke out everything else when nothing's there to eat them. Pull the gar out, and those rough fish take over. Leave the gar in, and the whole system stays in balance. One researcher compared it to how we used to think about wolves. We spent a long time killing wolves because we didn't understand the job they were doing, and the land got worse without them. Same fish, same mistake, same hard lesson. And with invasive Asian carp now tearing through American rivers, biologists are looking at the alligator gar, that old hated monster, as one of the few native predators big enough to eat the problem. So the wheel turned. Texas Parks and Wildlife, which manages some of the best gar water in the country, stepped in and put real protection on the fish. Back in 2009, they set a limit of 1 alligator gar per angler per day and began managing it as a regulated species instead of vermin. And it's working. Their biologists have tracked catch and release gar that were caught, let go, and caught again 3 and 4 times over the years, growing all the while. That tells you these fish handle release well when you do it right. And it tells you the population can come back when we let it. Other states are following, working to restore gar to rivers they were wiped out of. A fish we tried to erase is being welcomed home. Which brings us to how you actually catch one, if you're of a mind to, and how you do it without harming the fish or yourself. First, understand the problem you're up against, because it's a strange one. That armored, bony mouth that makes the gar such a good predator makes it a nightmare to hook. There's very little soft tissue in there for a hook to bite. Set the hook too soon on a gar, and you'll pull it right out of that hard mouth, over and over, and never stick a thing. The old-time gar men solved it with patience and with rope, letting the fish take the bait and turn before they came tight. But the tackle has come a long way, and so has our thinking about the fish. Here's the short of it. You fish heavy. This is a big, powerful, long-lived animal, so a stout rod, a strong reel, and heavy line. We're talking real muscle, not your bass setup. For bait, cutfish is the classic. A good chunk of shad or mullet, fished on the bottom or under a big float in the slow water where gar hold. And on the hook itself, the science has given us something the old-timers didn't have. Texas biologists tagging and tracking released gar have found that the type of hook matters a great deal for whether the fish survives being let go. The right hook, worked the right way, lets you land a giant and turn it loose in good shape. And that matters for a fish that takes half a century to grow. So if you go after gar, go after them as an angler who plans to give them back. When you do get one boat side, respect those teeth and respect that power. A green 3-foot gar thrashing in the bottom of a boat can cut you badly and hurt you with sheer muscle. So control the fish, mind the head, and if it's a true giant, get help. And before any of this, one thing above all. Check your state regulations. Every time. This is a fish whose rules vary wildly from one state line to the next. In some states, the alligator gar is tightly protected, and there are places you cannot keep one at all. In others, there's a strict one-per-day limit, like Texas. Bow fishing for gar is legal and popular in some waters, and restricted in others. Seasons, size rules, where you can and can't target them, it's all local, and it changes. Never take somebody's word, including mine, over your own state's current regs. This fish took 100 years of abuse. The least we can do is know the law before we put a hook in one. Now the warning I promised, and this one's for the whole family, not just the fishermen. Let's say you keep a gar to eat. The meat is genuinely good, firm and white, a real regional food all across the Gulf states. And there's nothing wrong with a mess of fried gar. But the eggs, the roe, are a different story. And this is the part people don't know. Alligator gar eggs are poisonous. Not spoiled, not risky, flat out toxic to people. They carry a substance called an ichthyotoxin, and if you eat those eggs, you're in for a miserable and dangerous night. Hard sickness through the gut, and in a bad case, worse than that. There is no antidote. It's treated by riding it out under a doctor's care. And here's the cruel twist that catches folks off guard. Cooking does not fix it. The toxin holds up to heat, so a cooked gar egg is every bit as poisonous as a raw one. Frying it, boiling it, none of it helps. Scientists think the gar evolved those toxic eggs as a defense, since the eggs get laid out shallow and exposed in that flooded grass where anything could eat them. And it's a rare trick. Only a small handful of fish on Earth are known to have poisonous roe. So the rule is dead simple. Eat the meat if you like, throw the eggs away, keep them away from kids and away from the dog, and never, ever put gar roe on the table. Tell the people you fish with. Not everybody knows. So let me pull this whole fish together for you, the way I wish somebody had laid it out for me the first time I hauled one up and didn't know what I was looking at. The alligator gar is a living fossil, a design 150 million years old that watched the dinosaurs come and go. It survived because it's armored in scales hard as tooth enamel and because it carries a lung that lets it breathe air and live where nothing else can. It grows to the size of a person and past 300 pounds, and the giants are old. Some of them nearly a century, most of them female, every one of them irreplaceable. It's a top predator that keeps its river in balance, not the villain we made it out to be, and it has never, in any true account, killed a human being. We nearly destroyed it out of ignorance, with guns and dynamite and dams, and now, with a little humility and some good science from folks like the Texas and Mississippi fisheries people, we're bringing it back. And if you ever eat one, remember the eggs will make you sick no matter how you cook them. That old fish outlasted the dinosaurs. It can outlast our worst ideas about it too, if we let it. So the next time you see that long, armored shape hanging in the slow water like a shadow of another age, don't reach for a reason to fear it, or a rifle to be rid of it. Look at it the way you'd look at a wolf on a ridge, or an old growth tree in a bottom nobody logged. Something ancient and rare, and worth more alive than gone. Read the water. Respect the fish, and if you catch one of these old dragons, take your picture and send it home to keep the river honest. There's more old watercraft coming this season, every bit of it backed by the reason it works. So subscribe and ride along. Until then, watch those teeth, honor the giants, and I'll see you on the water. Tight lines.